I have been known to lament the fact that solar power, which I'm a full-throated advocate of, but it's sexy. And in terms of cost effectiveness, it's not as cost effective as energy efficiency.
Well,
Right?
but even
But it ain't sexy, so it always gets the back seat.
We have been blessed by creation and community. The injustice of extractive relationships and systemic racism have fractured both. Let's Talk Rev is all about providing tools and access for communities to build power from the grassroots up for change at the policy level. Our guests are doing this in various ways. Sit back and enjoy this casual, spirited conversation with Rev.
welcome to Let's Talk with Rev. We are here. We're talking about We Rise, Alabama. We're looking at bringing everybody together and rising together to fight for energy justice throughout the state of Alabama. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to ensure that we do energy efficiency on everybody's home. And we want to use communities of faith to implement for communities of faith ways of doing this as a ministry for their congregations and the communities that their congregations sit in. Today's guest that we have is Stephen Guesman. But before I go there, I am joined with my team, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light, the PJC. And I would love for them just to introduce themselves. So Kyle, I'll hand it to you first, and then Marasia, and then Abigail.
Thank you, Rev. I am Kyle Kreider. I'm based in Helena, near Birmingham, Alabama. I am the Program and Policy Director for Alabama Interfaith Power and Light and the People's Justice Council.
Hi, my name is Marasia. I'm based in Birmingham, and I am the Media Coordinator for PJC and Alabama Interfaith Power and Light.
All right. Hey, y'all. My name is Abigail Franks. I am also based in Birmingham, Alabama, and I am the Programs and Outreach Coordinator for People's Justice Council and Alabama Interfaith Power and Light.
That's the team, y'all. They the ones that help to make this thing happen. Yes. Peace and love. And our guest today is none other than Stephen Guesman. Stephen, if you would just introduce yourself to the people, but I want you to do it this way for us. Take us through your journey. What brought you to Birmingham and what brings you to your now?
I'm Stephen Guesman. Currently live on a rural 80 acres in the middle of Blount County, but I'm a Birmingham native and urban refugee. What brought me to Birmingham was my father when I was 2 years old to come work at what was then Hayes International, which was a contractor at the airport. And I've been here ever since. Never actually even had a permanent address outside of the 350 zip codes. Been here all my life. I was in college in the 70s and caught the beginning of the Earth Day. I was at the first Earth Day in Birmingham and was deeply moved and involved in environmentalism and particularly the whole self-sufficiency, back to the land movement. And through a variety of circumstances was fortunate enough to actually acquire some land shortly after college. Spent about 25 years finding the right partner and getting other things queued up before I actually got to move here. But I've been living here in Blount County for over 25 years now. I live in a completely off the grid in a solar powered home with solar hot water and passive solar heat. We're attempting to grow much of our food. I jokingly say I've had a 5-year plan to be a farmer for 30 years. I'm actually finally getting around to it. It's starting to increasingly look like a retirement plan, but nonetheless, so we finally got our goats and chickens and are getting increasingly ambitious about the garden and such. So my general ambition concerning gardening is to be a market gardener, but only in the sense that I want to be able to feed myself and immediate family and a few folks in the neighborhood. Don't really aspire to be a Saturday morning truck farmer, and God forbid I would be a commodities farmer. So I'm just building up from basic self-sufficiency and seeing how many people I can feed until my time on this planet runs out. And COVID has actually forced me into an early retirement. I don't mean to make light of the hardship that it's caused on a great many people, but in my particular instance, it's given me the cheap courage to do something I've been wanting to do for 20 years, and that was stay on the farm and start farming. I don't imagine I'll not have to go back to work at some point, and I've got continuing clients and things that I need to take care of, so I will do that. But upon disposing of a publishing business in Birmingham that introduced me to my now current wife and put me back on the road to living in the country, living on this farm that I'd owned ever since college. I picked up a hammer and started being a hammer slinger for the second or third time in my life, not realizing it would be my new career. I was just biding my time until the next big thing came along. But I started taking some classes on green building and energy efficiency and sustainable communities at a place in Atlanta called South Face Energy Institute. And lo and behold, I became a green building energy efficiency expert. And some 5 or 8 years into it, finally realized that, gosh, I'm a contractor. I'm not just a hired hammer anymore. I was running the jobs and pitching jobs. And about then I adopted a name called Greenworks Design Build. And that's one of my many hats that I wear. And my email to this day is greenworks.sg@gmail.com. So if you've heard of Greenworks, particularly Greenworks Design Build, that's probably me. Had a website that will be up again. I've lost my server for now, but I've got a website that has some things, and I've been real keen on education all along. I'm an educator at heart, so my website is keen on educating folks. And as you will see, for those of you that continue on with this We Rise program, a major thrust of my training that I do for energy efficiency upgrades, or home energy makeovers, as I also call them, is to empower the individuals to do this for themselves. Because the things that need to be done to make the average home 20 to 30% more energy efficient are relatively very simple. It involves a whole lot of caulk and foam and just crawling over the house and knowing where to put it. Along the way, a little bit of understanding about the fundamental physics really helps you figure out how to proceed with energy weatherizing or making your home more energy efficient. So I've developed a formal presentation program that we'll be looking for venues to present that. But in particular, in addition to doing that as a occupation for some years, I increasingly invested in and delighted in teaching it. I really delight in teaching a homeowner how to do it for themselves. Partly is I can have a greater impact by teaching people how to do it than I can by doing one home at a time. Another aspect is I've seen way more attics and crawl spaces than I need to for a lifetime. So I'm content to be a teacher these days, although I'll still occasionally do the home energy makeover for somebody who's got a compelling need. But training trainers is something I'm really interested in. So I really like the idea. One component of the We Rise program, as I understand it, I see everybody nodding, is that we're going to use the congregations as a base, and we can go into a given congregation, hold a couple of day clinic, train some people who, and then in turn, with We Rise and myself as a resource, can in turn train more technicians. So we have teams of people working out of every congregation, weatherizing and energy efficiency upgrading homes, which is, again, when I come back to, is applied environmentalism. So many people, and particularly my cohorts aspire to environmentalism, but so often that's, amounts to buying an SUV so you can go to the recycling center on the weekends. And, that just ain't gonna do it.
Yeah.
We're in a sinking ship and we need more than a teacup.
Yeah.
We got to patch some holes. And energy efficiency is how we begin patching the holes.
I absolutely agree with that, Stephen. I tend to look at things through 3 P's. It's practical, it's policy, and then potential. So when I look at the We Rise program and the training, the trainers, I see the practical implications and implementation in that. Do you see policy that is called for that can couple with what we're trying to do that could actually make a difference in the state of Alabama as well as national?
There's a variety of things, but I generally, over the years, have abandoned much hope for government. It's a necessary evil, but you can't wait for the government to lead you out of a mess because they're not going to. And let's face it, government is by business for the benefit of business. Poor people, rarely bother constituting governments because they don't have anything to protect. It's folks that got privilege to protect. They constitute governments and hire police. So yes, we want to have some activity on the policy front, and there's a few things like, for instance, there had been a longstanding federal tax credit system for energy efficiency upgrades, but it didn't give you credit for labor. It just gave you credit for the capital. So it encouraged you to buy a high performance, expensive HVAC system, but it didn't pay a local kid a living wage to spend a week patching all the holes in your house, which is crazy because the most cost-effective dollar you can spend is patching the holes, right? And then consider more insulation or consider a more efficient upgrade. But first and foremost, patch the holes.
Patch the holes. I mean, that is absolutely, that's just low-hanging fruit. And I don't understand how that's a missed component.
Well, and I know how we got there. I can give you the thumbnail sketch on that real quickly.
Okay.
But basically, fossil fuels, it's fueled literally what some people are calling the third industrial revolution, or the second, depending on your perspective. And governments were built around the abundance and exploitation of fossil fuels. And they became, in our culture, is the worst. Europe is not far behind us, but we're the worst. The fossil fuels are unnaturally cheap. They're subsidized in so many ways up and down the chain of government and commerce that it's hard to even total it all up. But the bottom line is energy that you get out of a plug in the wall and energy that you get out of a pump at a gas station, they both cost twice as much in Europe. And Europe's heavily subsidized. We're outrageously subsidized. And that unnaturally cheap fossil fuel puts us into an alternate, unreal world. It's like Alice through the looking glass. We're in an economy that is not real. It doesn't value the real things in life, and it artificially values crap and things that are bad for us. But they, of course, enrich somebody along the chain, which is why they're there. So in the case of green building, energy was just so cheap that it was easier to just build a shoddy house and put in a bigger HVAC system, right? Well, as energy started getting less cheap, and really the first energy crisis during the Carter administration, which a few of us, maybe me, remember, a few wild-eyed radicals in the Department of Energy started thinking, how this country consumes energy, maybe that's a valid field for research. And that was the beginning of what we now call the green building movement. People had just never bothered even looking at it before. And it took 10 or 20 years for them to start getting some results. But when they did, they started coming up with the tabulations about how much energy this country consumes heating and cooling buildings. And it was a phenomenal number. People didn't believe it initially because the numbers were so big. And then they started looking at how buildings and homes in particular conserved or wasted energy, and several things really leapt off the sheet. And that was the real beginning of what we call green building. And I'll give you cut to the chase right now, which we'll go into much detail later on. But basically what they figured out was, let me show you something. We're going to see a lot more of this coming up. This chart is basically what they learned in the first 15 or 20 years when they actually started looking at homes. And what they started doing is they started taking whole components, not individual windows and doors, which had already had R ratings, and not just a piece of a wall with some fiberglass stuffed in it. They started taking whole walls and whole little houses and putting them in the lab and checking them. And what they found out was the single biggest thief was not only infiltration, i.e. air leaks, but look at duct leakage. Well, it turns out the ducts are actually part of your conditioned space, right? And ducts were just woefully leaky. So it's actually part of the air infiltration package. So collectively, air infiltration accounted for 45% of the energy loss, which dwarfs everything else. Insulation, new doors, high performance HVAC, none of it held a candle to just good old fashioned air leaks. And the problem is that the majority of them were in a lot of little places, which we'll talk about when we get into the training of this. But rarely do any of these leaks amount to something that you actually feel as a draft. You might collectively feel them as a draft, particularly if you live in an upstairs room or you're sitting next to an outside window in the winter. But a great many of these leaks are little bitty. They're just all over the place. But when you add them all up, they amount to the equivalent of a window and sometimes even a door standing open 24 hours a day. So that's the primary thrust of most, quote, weatherization. I prefer the term home energy efficiency, home energy upgrades. It's air sealing, air sealing, air sealing. And the reason why nobody hears anything about that is it's not capital intensive. Nobody makes any big money selling you the information and the tubes of caulk. Yeah, some people make money selling caulk, but compared to selling you a $5,000 HVAC unit or a $2,000 new set of windows for your house, or, there's not much money. There's not an ad budget behind selling energy efficiency like there is big ticket items, so you don't hear about it.
So
lots of information on the government websites, but as most people will find out, when you go trying to assay that information, it can be very bewildering. So one of the things I provide as a service to customers who employ me to help them build an energy efficient home is I provide a guideway through all the free information. It's out there. The government has sanctioned it and done the research and put it out there. It's just bewildering to try to answer a particular question.
So Stephen, let's stay there for a second. In our research, and I'll say in particular my research of trying to figure out the whole weatherization, energy efficiency matrix, I've found it extremely difficult, and I've got 2 master's degrees. I can just imagine the person that hadn't had the same type of education and doesn't necessarily live in a sealed home where the bill isn't as much. but lives on the lower tier of society, if you will. And oftentimes they're Black and they're brown and they're indigenous and they're poor and white. And from what the ACEEE has told us, they are upwards to 35% excessive energy burdens. So not just having energy burdens, but having excessive energy burdens, right. 35% beyond the national average. And most of those houses or most of those families exist in the Southeast. Why is there no weatherization, no energy efficiency, no home ceiling programs that the government or even utilities have offered, especially knowing the science on climate change and knowing the science on what gets not just out your home, but in your home if you've got your home sealed? That would be an easy win for environmental justice community. Seal their homes.
Rev, I'm very empathetic, perhaps even sympathetic for your position, because I was there 30 years ago. I was going, this is so obvious. Why don't we do this? I just don't ask those questions now because they're not productive questions. I've developed a few short answers for you. One is probably the most compelling bottom line is nobody's figured out how to make any money doing it. If somebody can figure out how to make some money doing it, my God, we're an ingenious group of folks. Somebody will do it, right? But the system is absolutely rigged. You know, government is designed to buy business for business, by the privileged for the privileged. So the system's rigged for sure. And it's not going to change in the near term. I'm not suggesting that we turn our back and give up on government. We can't do it. It's a necessary evil. But we sure can't wait on them. Alabama Power is literally one of the worst utilities in the country, literally in the country, for encouraging solar power. Our Public Service Commission certainly would rank, if anybody ranked such things, would certainly rank well up into the top 10 of worst public service commissions in the country, i.e. not doing a public service. Our Public Service Commission is practically handpicked by Alabama Power, right? You probably have heard of the Three Mules in Montgomery, Alabama politics. They've actually changed, but the Three Mules used to be Farmers Federation. A lot of people call them Alpha, but that's just the insurance side of the equation. They're actually the Farmers Federation. Alabama Power, and Kyle, you maybe know, who used to be the third one, Kyle? Used to be the AEA. Timber. Used to be the AEA, Alabama Educational Association. But that's what has changed. They're no longer in one of the top three. Timber is very close up there, but see, Timber's really allied with the Farmers Federation. They're kind of under that big tent. But the point is, our Constitution in Alabama was written in 1901, and it was written by colonialists. And they designed it to keep labor dumb, cheap, and disenfranchised. And they openly bragged about the fact that they were not only just disenfranchising Black folks, that they were disenfranchising those uppity white folks that were part of the populism of the age, right? They openly bragged about it. And they did a very good job. So not surprisingly, Alabama is practically a third world state, right? So that's just what we've got to work with. It's like I keep referring the challenges of being an organizer and a progressive in such a unprogressive state with being a golfer. The sand traps and the roughs and the challenges is what makes it a course. And it makes no more sense for an organizer in the state of Alabama to be complaining about the state of government or the state of their constituents, so that why aren't they paying attention? Why don't they care more? It makes no more sense for us to be complaining about that than it does for a golfer to be stomping around a golf course, cussing the sand traps, right? If there weren't the sand traps, it wouldn't be a game, right? So if you're going to play the game of progressivism in Alabama, let's quit complaining and get on with the work. And we've got an uphill task for sure. We're in one of the worst places in the world, right?
I love it. I love it.
But at a certain stage in your own moral maturity, you don't really have any choice. I can't do anything different now. Yeah. I'm way too gone. I got to do this.
Yeah.
I got to do it for my own peace of mind.
Yeah.
So I'm past the point of doing a cost-benefit analysis and lamenting the devils in Alabama Power, and they're not devils. I don't want to indemnify them. They're good people that love their family and take care of their kids, and are doing the best that they can. They just can't see. They got scales on their eyes, and they just don't see. And that's part of our job, is to try to help remove the scales. Yeah. But we got to do it with their cooperation. We can't do it by pissing and moaning and throwing stones.
Well, I believe communities of faith, and I want Kyle and Abigail and Marasia to jump in at any point as well, but I believe communities of faith have an opportunity to lead in this arena because of our connection with community. And because of our contacts and our reach. I believe that if we lead in this conversation, we can really get some things done. Because the reality is everybody needs a pastor, or at least a faith leader in their life, or at least somebody of influence that you can talk to that has a conscience. And in that, all of us have connection to someone. And if we can get communities of faith involved in this entire process, if we can get them involved in energy efficiency, as I say, Stephen, if we can make energy efficiency just as sexy as we made food pantries, we'd be really doing something. If we could see it.
I have been known to lament the fact that solar power, which I'm a full-throated advocate of, but it's sexy. And in terms of cost effectiveness, it's not as cost effective as energy efficiency.
Well,
right? But it ain't sexy, so it always gets the back seat.
But even if you put solar on some of these homes, if they've got holes everywhere, it doesn't make a bit of a difference. The first thing you've got to do is start with sealing these homes up.
Yeah. That's
one of the first thing you've got to start with.
That's one of the common presenting complaints to me is people say, I'm really tired of my energy bills. How much would it cost me to solarize my home? And my response, my cultured response that I've developed over the years is, until you reduce your energy bills by half, you can't afford to solarize, right? Because you're just putting expensive equipment in a sinking boat.
Right.
And that doesn't make any sense. So energy efficiency is primary.
So I see that we have some solutions, but how do we get those solutions out there? Like, people have questions. People are still learning about this. How do we get these solutions out there?
We just got to go to the grassroots. And that's why y'all's notion of the We Rise movement, that's going to be based out of congregations of faith in particular communities. That's why that's such a wonderful idea. It's because it takes in-person, hands-on. I do a 2-hour clinic that easily expands into a 2-day training of the trainers, but it involves a little bit of skull drilling, a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation, and a little bit of the physics, but it also involves getting your hands on these cans of caulk and tubes of foam, and me dragging you around the house and say, right there, look right there. There's a hole. And I know it doesn't feel like much, but multiply that hole times 200 and you've got an open window or an open door. So spend the next few Saturdays, a few hours a day, crawling around the house with these tubes of caulk and cans of foam, and your energy bill will drop by 15 to 30%. And then you'll have the money to upgrade your insulation or to buy better windows, or for God forbid, take a vacation or whatever, energy efficiency makes money, but it's not sexy. And at some point, somebody's got to get dirty and take a tube of caulk and go where the cracks are. And, you know,
you got to eat your energy efficiency veggies before you rush to your solar energy desserts.
I like that, Cal.
I didn't coin it, but I only steal from the best.
This distributed program of going into the congregations and training trainers, you know, doing a few homes as a training for 2 or 3 people, and then each one of those people can pick up a couple of assistants and do a couple of homes. You know, it becomes a very progressive pyramid that before you know it's got half the homes in the community, you know, 20, 30% more energy efficient. And then that kind of money flowing into the community and staying into the community makes a difference.
Well, I mean, it would make a difference in that congregation's life.
Yes.
Just imagine if every home or everybody in your congregation had energy efficiency done to their homes, and they seal their homes up, and they're getting, 15, 20% back from their bill, and they're paying 10% for their tithes increase. Yeah. What can you do with that extra income that comes? What kind of ministry could you do with that extra income that comes to your congregation?
And here's another big benefit that's hard to quantify, but most indoor air pollution problems are not coming from indoors. They're coming in those same old leaks that are squandering the energy. So making a home energy efficient almost always makes the home more healthful. And that can be very consequential for somebody who has asthmatic kids or kids that have a lot of allergies, right? You know, and it's one of these background kinds of things that so many things are making you react and feel unwell that it's hard to put a finger on it. But you start truly controlling the conditioned air in your house, and we're not really doing that very well right now. In principle, we do that. We talk like we do, but in practice, we got a lot of leaks. If you really start controlling the conditioned air in your house, all of a sudden, the stuff starts receding. It doesn't go away overnight, but it starts receding. And we've been doing this long enough now that we've got the data that demonstrates it, that energy efficient homes are safe and healthy homes.
Well, I mean, let's take it to a community level and look at a community such as one communities that are located in northern Birmingham, and look at the pollution, the legacy pollution that they've had to endure and still endure. And imagine if they had weatherization or energy efficiency done to their homes, and how much of an improvement to the quality of life they would have, just from a health perspective, not just an income perspective, but from a health perspective.
Yeah.
Because it'll keep some of those particles out of their houses.
And even if they do decide to invest in a high efficiency filters or other amendments to the indoor air quality, it'll all have greater effect if your house isn't leaking air all the time. So at least it's like, until you do the fundamental energy efficiency, the home energy makeover, I like to call it, you're in a hatchet fight without a hatchet, you know? And it doesn't make all your problems go away, but it at least gives you a hatchet. You know, you got something to stand on. Doesn't, like you say, it's not going to undo generations of legacy pollution, but.
Yeah, this conversation makes me think about how much different things would have been like last summer or the summer beforehand. So I have asthma, right? And y'all know that we had so many bad air quality days, so many. And so like there would be days where I would try to stay inside my house because the air quality was so bad and it was giving me breathing problems and headaches and stuff like that. But then that didn't even work because my house was not energy efficient at all. It was a 1920s house that did not have, I mean, I was renting it with like for other people. But yeah, but like I mean, it was energy efficient, and I can't imagine like the medical bills I would have saved. I mean, it's compounding. It's not just like the immediate effects. It's a ripple.
And like you say, and the unquantifiable stuff, just like your health, your happiness, and the amount of energy and motivation you have for other useful things in your life, you spend just managing an induced disease, an environmentally induced disease. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And someday we may have an enlightened government that actually is taking care of the people, but we can't wait on it. It's not going to happen in my lifetime.
Now, Stephen, I do want to talk about the potential, because this is actually a job creator as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And in a real sense, this could be a community development project.
It absolutely is.
That people could have, or even looking at congregations forming a business that could help support their congregations and help support their churches. This could be an avenue that's practical and that's easy to do.
Well, let me take that as a springboard to give you the thumbnail sketch here on why I don't like the term weatherization. Of all the air leaks in your house, the ones that you should be the least concerned about are the ones around your doors and windows. And that's the ones that weatherization does first, right? It's not that it's not worth doing. It's just that it's well down the list of priorities, okay? For years, the power company has done what they called energy audits. And they would come out to your house and do a very cursory look over, give you a handout that told you to do the basic bromides of weather stripping your doors and windows. And oh, by the way, how about a cheap electric heater that we have on sale this month? So to me, my generation, I'm a baby boomer. To my generation, which is practically the first generation of environmentalists, I guess, Earth Day being 1970, the power company has really cheapened the terms weatherization and energy audit, much like what the Soviet Union did for communism. You know, they were as a valid test of the thesis of communism, they were a very lousy test, but they nonetheless have ruined the word for at least a few generations, because you can't use the word communism without evoking images of the repressive Stalinist regime in Russia. Well, that's what happens to me when people talk about energy audits and weatherization. I think about Alabama Power Company knocking on your door and giving you caulk and a cheap water heater. So I prefer terms like home energy assessment, home energy makeover. In the government brochures and in the halls of academia, it's called energy efficiency upgrades. So if you do go looking on the websites for this kinds of information, EEUs, energy efficient upgrades, is one of the key words that you'll search and find information under. I don't know that it's worth rubbing anybody's nose in those kinds of distinctions. But suffice it to say, the power company has not been our friend in this regard.
Right.
The Public Service Commission has basically been a lapdog to the dominant power in this state. So they too have not been a servant of the people. And someday maybe we'll have some just reckoning on that front, but we can't wait on it. We got to take care of ourselves.
Well, listen, Kyle had a question for you. This is going to be our last question as we're getting ready to get out of here. And Kyle had one last question for you. We're going to get this question out of the way, and then we'll go ahead and get out of here. And let me tell you, Stephen, thank you for being with us. Thank you for the information, and I look forward to the work that we'll be doing together through We Rise.
I appreciate it. As I had mentioned on a couple of other occasions, I've been intending to participate in a program such as this for years, and actually had a couple of false starts, and I'm delighted that we seem to be poised and ready for something big. I love it.
Rev
Yes,
is
Kyle.
definitely making it rain, and we are looking forward to working with you. And we wanted to end on a personal note. So would you please tell our viewers about the oxymorons?
Well, I have 5 different business cards in my wallet. One of which I mentioned previously, that's the Greenworks Design Build, and that was my primary revenue source. But I've also been a teacher of Tai Chi Chuan for 30 or 40 years. And one of my retirement strategies is to bring my Tai Chi practice onto the front burner, and that's looking hopeful. We're starting to have Tai Chi classes at the Botanical Gardens, for instance. Particularly, COVID kept us from having them during the winter, but now with the advent of spring, we'll be moving back to the Botanical Gardens. So you can look forward to Tai Chi in the gardens sometime soon. I'm also the founding member of a band called the Oxymorons, which you could call it contradictions in sound. But we're a string band, a baby boomer string band. We play everything but bluegrass. So we're kind of string band rock and roll, if you can imagine that. I'm also in the sustainability sphere, much concerned with sustainable agriculture, and particularly the current movement, largely championed by a man called Joel Salatin and Polyface Farms in Virginia. He got a lot of press. If you read a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma, Joel Salatin and Polyface Farms was the middle main chapter of that book. It was the biggest takeaway from that book. People came out of that going, wow, there is hope for agriculture. That was
Love
Joel
Michael
Salatin.
Pollan.
Yes. And Joel Salatin basically has been championing pastured meats. And he's quick to tell you that he's not inventing this. He's just rediscovering the way meats used to be raised. And that was on the pasture. We didn't have antibiotics. We didn't have nitrogen fertilizers. We didn't have chemical additives. We just had pasture, God's grass and fresh air and sunshine. And that's how they do it now. So I've been working with a local producer of those kinds of meats, generally called pastured meats, for some years. And I'm developing a little bit of a sideline business called Uncle Goose's All Naturals that delivers those meats, and aspiring to do that for myself, which is why I have meat goats that are kidding in the field outside my picture window, probably as we speak. And that was 4 of them. Oh, well, that's enough for now.
Well, again, Stephen, I do appreciate you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your knowledge. And thank you just for being you. We appreciate the lightheartedness. We appreciate it that you made it manageable for us and attainable. We could understand where you were getting at, and definitely saw the injustice. And again, we challenge each and every one that is listening right now and looking right now to get involved in We Rise, especially if you're a faith leader or a member of your congregation. Take this to your faith leader and see if they would like to get involved with We Rise, because we want to train up some trainers, train up some leaders on climate to help us to fight against climate injustice and fight against environmental injustice and help right the wrongs. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Today we offer you love, peace, and light.
See us all soon.